Tonight, we are going to travel back to a quieter world, a world without electricity, without engines, without glowing screens in the darkness, a world where night was truly dark and where the unknown felt very close. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a small medieval village somewhere in Europe. It could be in the rolling green hills of England, or perhaps near the deep forests of Germany, or along the misty valleys of France. The year is somewhere between 1100 and 1400. No one here knows exactly how large the world is. Most people will never travel further than a few days from where they were born, and above them, the sky feels vast and mysterious. In this world, dragons were not fantasy creatures from books. They were possibilities. For medieval villagers, the line between myth and reality was very thin. Bestiaries, beautifully illustrated books describing animals, included lions, wolves, eagles, and dragons. To the medieval mind, dragons were simply rare, distant, dangerous creatures, like crocodiles in faraway lands, or serpents that lived beyond the mountains. The church spoke of dragons symbolically. Saints were said to defeat them, most famously, Saint George. But symbolism in the Middle Ages was not separate from reality. If a saint could defeat a dragon, then dragons must exist somewhere. Now, imagine living in a village surrounded by deep forest. The forest was not a friendly place. It was dark even during the day. Wolves lived there. Wild boars. Strange sounds echoed at night. Fog would roll in without warning. Trees twisted in shapes that looked almost alive. And sometimes people saw something. In 12th century England, chroniclers recorded strange sightings. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, in earlier centuries, described fiery serpents seen in the sky. In 793, monks wrote about terrible portents appearing before Viking raids. Among them, fiery dragons flying through the air. To modern ears, this sounds symbolic. Perhaps a comet. Perhaps the Northern Lights. But to those monks, it was written as observation. They believed what they saw. In 1190, in Suffolk, England, reports described a huge dragon emerging from the sea, fighting another dragon in the sky. The chronicler Ralph of Coggeshall wrote about it as something witnessed, not imagined. Pictured to peasants standing near the coastline at dusk. The sky red from sunset. Clouds shifting strangely. Perhaps a meteor streaks across the sky. Perhaps two birds lock claws midair. In the half-light, in fear, in wonder, the mind fills the rest. Now we move to France. In the city of Rouen, there was the legend of La Gargoyle, a dragon-like creature said to live in the River Seine, breathing fire and flooding the town. According to legend, Saint Romanus subdued it in the 7th century. Its head was mounted on the city walls. The word gargoyle comes from this story. When villagers saw strange shapes in the river mist, when floods destroyed crops, when lightning struck water, it was not random nature. It was the dragon. Medieval people lived extremely close to natural forces. Storms were terrifying. Lightning could set entire villages ablaze. A drought could mean starvation. A single disease in cattle could ruin everyone. Dragons became a way to explain concentrated destruction. In the Alps, there are records from the 14th century of villagers claiming winged serpents lived in mountain caves. Travelers wrote about encountering enormous reptilian creatures in remote passes. Imagine walking a narrow mountain path. Fog thick around you. The sound of rocks shifting above. Suddenly, a large bearded vulture lifts off from a cliff. Its wings span nearly 3 meters wide. Its shadow enormous. Your heart stops. In that moment, what did you see? A bird? Or something ancient and terrible? In Scandinavia, dragon imagery was deeply rooted in culture. Viking ships bore dragon heads on their prows. Not because dragons were fictional, but because they represented power, chaos, and the wild forces of the world. Runestones carved with serpentine beasts still stand today. In 1345, in Klagenfurt, Austria, a skull was discovered and believed to belong to a dragon. It was displayed proudly. Centuries later, scientists determined it was the skull of a woolly rhinoceros from the Ice Age. But imagine the first villagers who saw it. A massive skull, huge eye sockets, strange shape, unearthed from the ground. What else could it be? In medieval Europe, fossils were sometimes interpreted as dragon bones. Without paleontology, without evolutionary science, bones emerging from Earth were mysteries. And mysteries needed explanations. Let us return to the quiet village at night. It is winter. Snow covers the fields. A shepherd notices several sheep dead in the morning, their bodies torn, blood on the ground, tracks in the snow unclear from drifting wind. Perhaps wolves. But wolves were known. Wolves were understood. This looked worse. Rumors begin. Old Martyr, who lives near the woods, says she saw a long shadow moving between trees the night before. A farm boy claims he heard wings. Within days, the village priest speaks during Sunday sermon about vigilance against evil forces. Fear spreads softly, not in screams, but in whispers. When fear meets imagination, dragons are born. There is also the sky. Comets were seen as omens. In 1066, a comet appeared, now known as Halley's Comet. The Bayeux tapestry depicts it clearly. To the people of that time, it was a flaming dragon in the heavens. Fire in the sky meant change. War. Death. Judgment. Dragons were celestial as well as earthly. In 1572, long after the medieval period, but still within a similar mindset, residents of Basel, Switzerland, reported a dragon flying across the sky after a violent storm. The story was recorded seriously. Witnesses described scales and wings. Perhaps lightning, perhaps debris caught in wind. But for them, the explanation was simple. The dragon had passed overhead. It is easy, from the modern world, to smile at these stories. But pause for a moment. Turn off every electric light in your house. Sit in complete darkness. Listen to the smallest creak. Feel how your imagination awakens. Now remove all scientific knowledge you possess. Remove satellites. Remove weather forecasts. Remove biology textbooks. What remains? A world alive with unseen forces. Medieval bestiaries describe dragons in detail. Some had 2 legs, some 4. Some breathed fire. Others had poisonous breath. They were said to guard treasures, inhabit caves, and fear elephants. These books were not fantasy novels. They were encyclopedias of the natural and spiritual world. To the medieval reader, a dragon was as real as a lion, simply rarer. And then there were travelers' tales. Merchants returning from distant lands described giant serpents in Africa and Asia. Crocodiles were unknown to most Europeans. When described poorly, they sounded exactly like dragons. Large, armored, teeth like knives, living near water. Over generations, descriptions transformed. Let us not forget the role of illness. Ergot poisoning from contaminated grain could cause hallucinations. People might see shapes in the air, movement in shadows. Collective fear can spread through communities quickly. Mass sightings were not uncommon. And in times of plague, dragons sometimes symbolize the disease itself, a poisonous breath sweeping across lands. In some towns, dragon processions were held. Large dragon effigies paraded through streets as part of religious festivals. These did not represent fantasy, but spiritual reality. The dragon was chaos. The dragon was danger. The dragon was the unknown. And sometimes the unknown took shape. In the quiet of medieval nights, with only candlelight flickering on stone walls, stories were told. Children listened wide-eyed. Adults nodded seriously. Hunters claimed to see scales glinting in moonlight. Perhaps they truly believed. Perhaps they truly saw something. Because seeing is not only about eyes. It is about context. It is about expectation. It is about the world you think you live in. In caves across Europe, strange reptilian fossils have been found. Large bones, curved shapes, jaw fragments. To a medieval villager, this was confirmation-proof. The dragon had once lived here. And maybe it's still dead. As the centuries passed and science grew, dragons slowly moved from the category of possible creature to mythical symbol. But for hundreds of years, intelligent, thoughtful, deeply religious people truly believed they shared their world with dragons. Not as fairy tale beasts, but as rare animals of God's creation. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine standing at the edge of a forest in the year 1230. The moon is full. Mist curls between trees. An owl calls. Far off, something large moves. Branches crack. You cannot see clearly. Your heart beats slowly. And for just a moment, you understand. Why dragons felt real. Why they were written into chronicles. Why skulls were displayed as trophies. Why sermons warned of them. Why villagers whispered. Because in a world wrapped in darkness and mystery, dragons were simply the shape that fear chose to wear. And perhaps, in some quiet corner of the medieval mind, they were not only fear. They were wonder. They were the edge of the map. They were the reminder that the world was vast and still unexplored. Now the village sleeps. The candles burn low. The forest grows silent. And the dragons fade gently into the mist.